No. No. Nope. No. No high maintenance. This looks like what I'm looking for. So you may be wondering what's going on here. Is this some kind of strange combat mission version of Tinder with armored vehicles? No, Bricklord and I are going to be playing a scenario without tanks, so just using armored cars and half-tracks. There's plenty of those to choose from. I'm looking at the German side, which is what Bricklord is going to be playing. There's a lot of machine guns, light cannon, but also light armor. So everything on the battlefield will be able to kill pretty much everything else. So let's take a look at what my options are going to be playing the US side. I have the standard M3 half-track armed with 1 or 2 50 caliber machine guns. The M16 anti-aircraft half-track armed with 4 50 caliber machine guns. And the M15A1 anti-aircraft half-track armed with a 37mm autocannon and 2 50 caliber machine guns underneath. The M20 armored car, which is armed with a 50 caliber machine gun. Disadvantage is it has an open top. And perhaps the best armored car of the war, the M8 Greyhound. It has a 37mm cannon with a really vicious canister round for dealing with infantry. And then lastly, the ubiquitous Willys MB Jeep, which can be also armed with a machine gun. Bricklord and I will be playing a meeting engagement using Combat Mission Final Blitzkrieg. We will both be buying reconnaissance forces. We'll be racing to control these 3 objectives in the middle of a light rain. The map includes the village of Schmidt with a lot of houses and buildings surrounded by open spaces and dominated by a woods-covered hill in the center west overlooking the town of Schmidt. The Road Junction South objective is very close to my starting location. It should be easy to take and defend. To attack this objective, my opponent will have to cross the large hill that dominates the map, which isn't really a problem, but the problem will come when he gets to the reverse slope down into the village. Upon cresting this hill, my opponent will be exposed to all the firepower that I can muster without being able to return fire. I have purchased an anti-tank company that has 2 platoons of towed 57mm anti-tank guns, so I plan to send 1 platoon along with the attached scout car section to race ahead to this objective to secure it. The primary and central objective of the town of Schmidt is also well within reach. Again, my objective is to rush my troops forward as fast as possible to quickly occupy that center objective and set my vehicles up in keyhole positions between the buildings to where they can adequately cover the reverse slope leading down from the woods and also be able to block any advance from my opponent's corner of the map. For this job, I have purchased a reconnaissance troop which consists of 3 platoons, each of which has 2 sections consisting of 2 M8 armored cars, 1 half-track, and 1 scout team. Each platoon also has a 3-tube 60mm mortar section and various reconnaissance jeeps. It will be the job of this force to advance quickly to the center objective, take it, hold it, and prepare for action against the 3rd objective. In response, my opponent could come through the woods on the hill north of the town, but like the 1st objective, he will still have to come down a reverse slope where my units will have good fields of fire. The 3rd objective, Road Junction North, will be more challenging to take. Beyond the cover and concealment offered by all the buildings, this objective is dominated by the hill in my opponent's corner. It has good fields of fire down on anyone who might approach this objective. One possible approach is to advance on my right flank using buildings from the village and a hill to mask my approach, but this has the strong probability of being interdicted by fire from the enemy's hill. I could also try attacking from the village of Schmidt through the woods into the flank of the objective, but that's not good territory for vehicles. In addition to those options, I could send my forces west of the woods to counterattack the objective from the rear. With that in mind, I believe there are 3 pieces of key terrain on the map. Number 1 is the crest of the hill to the west of Schmidt. If I can keep fire on this area, my opponent will not be able to attack down the slope. Number 2 is the built-up area between the northern objective and the center objective, where I believe a lot of the fighting is going to occur. Number 3 is Bricklord's hill that he can use for observation. That's why I have mortars. In my initial orders, the anti-tank company will be moving to secure Road Junction South and also moving anti-tank guns into the town of Schmidt. 3rd Platoon and 2nd Platoon of the Recon troop will also move to Schmidt to secure the town quickly. 1st Platoon will remain in reserve behind my right flank so that they can conduct an attack later in the game against the northern objective. Lastly, 1 platoon of anti-aircraft half-tracks will be deployed in various areas along the line where they can use their 37mm guns and 50 caliber machine guns to fire at any enemies that crest the hills and come down the reverse slopes. With assignments set, away we go. And I have to admit, this looks a little bit like a World War II version of a Mad Max movie. And for the moment, the biggest danger to my troops would seem to be that of a traffic jam. It doesn't take that long, however, for me to get my first contact. A Recon Jeep on my far right flank makes the spot of some armored vehicles coming down the hill from my opponent's corner. It's a German 222 armored car in an overwatch position. Having made the spot, my Jeep attempts to back out of danger, but a hail of gunfire kills off the entire crew. Upon reaching the main road in Schmidt, one of my reconnaissance Jeeps spots a 251 armored personnel carrier trying to enter the north end of town. The Germans back off. My focus on speed has paid off. It looks like I've beaten the Germans to Schmidt, so now it's time to bring in additional forces and consolidate my position. A smaller 250 half-track is spotted and engaged. An unfortunate Kubelwagen wanders into the kill zone.
Nice shot!
Pretty sure you got it, guys. On the far right, close to where my Jeep was destroyed, an M8 Greyhound was also hit by a high explosive shell. Fortunately, the crew is able to bail out. A Stummel half-track with a 75mm gun in an overwatch position appears to be to blame. With the Stummel spotted, another M8 moves in behind a building and takes its shot.
You know what to do, bring him down!
While these first contacts are being made, I'm able to build up my forces in the town of Schmidt itself, moving anti-tank guns, infantry, and mortars into position. At the south road junction by the church, my 57mm anti-tank gun also takes up position to cover the ridgeline. On my left-hand side, I send a Recon Jeep up the hill in order to see if my opponent is moving any forces there. They spot a German heavy armored car and start taking machine gun and cannon fire.
Oh God!
German infantry is spotted on the wooded hill overlooking Schmidt and starts firing down into the town. More German infantry arrives, but is caught in the crossfire between my men in the houses and my Greyhound scout cars. In the face of my firepower, the German infantry decide to retreat, leaving Schmidt safe for now. On my right flank, to deal with the German half-tracks in overwatch position, I call in a mortar barrage. Whether due to the mortars or just a general German advance, more half-tracks come into the line of fire. A combination of 50 caliber and 37mm fire halts the attack. Still more half-tracks attempt to outflank my position on the right. They've used the reverse slope down into a farm field to mask their approach. Back west of Schmidt, a Puma armored car is spotted coming through the woods.
Bring him down!
The M5 half-track manages to put a few extra viewports into the Puma. But, in a bit of revenge, the German reconnaissance half-track spots and then destroys my M15A1. The ammunition detonates, killing the entire crew. Up on the ridge, more German infantry appear. Again, my firepower repels the attackers. Then, even more half-tracks and armored cars appear above Schmidt. Unfortunately for the Jeep, that's not all there is on top of the ridge. A last German Recon half-track retreats to the safety of northern Schmidt. My troops do not let it escape. At the 10-minute mark, I feel like I'm in a pretty good position. My troops hold 2 of the objectives and have managed to blunt multiple attacks from the woods, through the town, and on my right flank. With my opponent having lost quite a few forces attacking my positions, it's now time to start thinking about how to take that final objective. One option is to attack on my left flank around the woods. This would involve sending my forces up the hill and across some pretty open ground, with the advantage of being able to attack my opponent from the rear. However, my Recon Jeep had spotted multiple German armored cars in this area, and it's a lot of open ground to cover. The other option is to attack from the right flank. This has the advantage of being able to use the buildings in Schmidt itself for cover for my advance. However, I will have to neutralize any enemy on the key terrain hill behind the town. To see if the left flank attack is an option, I send another reconnaissance jeep up the hill to check things out. Unfortunately, the jeep spots a Zugkraftwagen, a Stummel half-track armed with a 75mm gun, a 251 armored personnel carrier, and another Zugkraftwagen in the distance.
I see him.
Based on this information, I decide to attack from my right flank. Before I can get things going, a 222 armored car comes out of nowhere speeding towards me. This guy is like a stunt driver, breaks through a fence. This type of driving does not go unnoticed or unpunished. Fences are taken very seriously in Schmidt. To set up for my attack, I begin moving scout teams up from building to building to scout out the enemy. The adjacent building turns out to be occupied. Eviction notice served. The scout team can now begin observing. They spot a Puma armored car on one of the approaches to the northern objective. Another scout team spots a Stummel half-track armed with a 75mm gun along the road to the objective. As my men and vehicles move forward, a mortar barrage is called in on top of the hill to suppress any vehicles or infantry that may still be up there. Sensing the time is right, I begin my attack from my right-hand side using one full platoon of my cavalry troop. The lead troop pulls out from behind cover. First section reaches its jumping off point on my far right flank. From here it can use the buildings to mask its approach to the final objective. One of the half-tracks on the far right receives a nasty surprise. The presence of more German armor here is a surprise. Before I can swing my attack to the left, I have to deal with this threat to my right flank. Another hidden half-track. My section leader gets spooked and retreats. I bring in a reconnaissance jeep to keep the pressure on. After popping smoke, my section leader returns to finish the job. With the destruction of this half-track, my right flank appears to be secure. House by house, the scout teams advance in Schmidt. Again, armored vehicles are spotted. Another scout team approaches the main street leading west through town to the final objective. They also spot armored vehicles. The survivors resume their scanning. This gives me a really good picture of what's down the road to the objective. There's at least 4 or 5 armored vehicles there. Scouts pick up more armor, approaching the center of Schmidt.
Armored vehicle!
Faced with infantry and houses, the German armored vehicles pop smoke and use that to cover a withdrawal. The smoke fails to blind everyone, however. A nearby burning stumble detonates, killing or injuring even more Germans. The survivors disappear behind a wall of smoke. On the right, my troops begin their advance to the enemy-held portion of Schmidt. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Essentially, one machine gun armed Jeep and one Greyhound have turned the street into a German junkyard. One German half-track manages to do some damage in return, but it's too little too late, and the Germans begin to retreat. Even this is not without loss. And with that, the street of death becomes quiet. On the left, I pick up approaching sound contacts on top of the hill.
Half-track!
One of my teams in the tall building has spotted a Zugkraftwagen sitting on top of the hill. Fortunately, I had already ordered 2 M8 scout cars to deploy just below the crest of the hill.
Armored vehicle!
Contact is made, and a major battle ensues. The intense short-range battle cost me one of my Greyhounds.
Roger, fire for effect.
I'm facing a large armored force with only an M8 Greyhound and a Jeep. Make that just a Greyhound. But now that the Germans have gotten to the edge of the hill, they're vulnerable to fire from my dug-in troops down in the town. The Germans are unable to suppress my anti-tank defenses, and they take their toll. Miraculously, my Greyhound has survived, and both sides retreat to lick their wounds. Back on my far right, my long-range shooting M5A1 half-tracks have established firing positions to get the enemy off of the hill. This allows my main attack force to begin moving forward. The M5A1s behind them blast any targets of opportunity. German armored car on the hill reappears and attempts to intervene. It's a mess. Again, the long-range shooters do their work. Another recon section races up to attack down the main street. And not everyone's ready to surrender though, and my scout teams at the house come under additional machine gun fire. For the moment they have to pull back. My lead Greyhound begins picking its way through the parking lot. Some Germans are spotted fleeing for safety. On the left side of town, another recon section moves forward. This same section takes out a loaded German truck before the troops can deploy. My advance continues shooting down streets and alleyways and exacting a heavy toll on the Germans who are retreating. Unfortunately, they retreat right into the road that one of my reconnaissance sections is planning to assault. One recon section moves up on the right side of the village directly towards the objective. The lead M8 spots a Zugkraftwagen in overwatch position. On my left, I decide to launch one recon section into an attack on my opponent's flank. I believe this will come as a surprise and will serve to deter my opponent from pushing further towards the southern objective. As expected, it is a target-rich environment and they are facing the wrong way. It's a bit of a turkey shoot.
Fire for effect. Out. Fire for effect.
3 vehicles are destroyed in quick succession. Return fire kills the commander, and then the vehicle. The other 3 members of the recon section retreat back to town. Despite the casualties, I believe this has been a successful attack into the flank of my opponent, stopping him from further advance.
We got company.
But not quite. 2 armored vehicles appear on my far left, attempting to infiltrate the church area and the South Road Junction objective. Fortunately, 50 caliber machine gun fire forces them to retreat. Meanwhile, recon sections keep pushing through the center of Schmidt towards the final objective. To cover the left flank of my advance on the objective, one recon section makes its way up the wooded hill. I suspect a number of German armored cars are up on top of the hill waiting to fire down into the objective area. It turns out that I'm right. It's a twofer, with shots going through both vehicles. No mercy is shown. That's a pretty good shot. 2 recon sections continue to secure the hill overlooking the final objective. Again, multiple German half-tracks and armored cars are caught out in the open, and engaged with 50 caliber machine gun fire, which proves very effective. The advantage of turreted versus non-turreted vehicles is very clear, as my M8s and my M3 half-tracks are able to more quickly engage the Germans. With the hill overlooking the northern part of Schmidt secure, I'm able to move my troops into the objective. One last half-track makes an appearance and causes my last casualty. With this last threat neutralized, my recon teams and half-tracks are able to move into the objective, mop up the stragglers, and take a few prisoners. And with that, the game ends with a total victory for me. I had 12 vehicles destroyed, but my opponent lost 44 vehicles. I did control all 3 objectives, and in fact controlled 2 of them for most of the game. I think it was absolutely critical that I rushed my forces forward to capture the central Schmidt objective before my opponent could arrive. Once my troops were on site, it was very difficult for Bricklord to bring his Germans down over the ridgeline and through the woods to engage my forces with any success. The southern objective was never really in jeopardy, and I believe I spoiled my opponent's attack on this position by coming up to meet him on top of the plateau and having a large armored battle there. And in the advance on the final objective, my scout teams were invaluable at moving ahead of my vehicles, spotting targets so that I could plan to attack them in a systematic and overwhelming manner. Also, just can't say enough about the M8 Greyhound. It spots enemies very well, has a great cannon and 50 caliber machine gun, and also a very effective canister round against infantry. Those are big advantages against more heavily armed but turretless German armored vehicles. Bricklord and I did talk about the game and what could have happened differently. If you're going to attack down a slope like this, you really have to bring the artillery, because otherwise you can't suppress the enemy without being under direct fire yourself. So I hope that you enjoyed this shoot 'em up. Feel free to leave constructive comments, as I do want to get better at making these after action reports. This is One Ping Only. Thanks for watching.